Good evening, everybody. I'll call the meeting to order. Um, but before we start, it was with great sadness that Coaldale learned of the Humboldt Broncos tragedy this past weekend. Council has asked that we observe a moment of silence prior to the commencement of today's meeting. With that in mind, let us now bow our heads for a moment of reflection. Thank you. With the first item of business, is there anybody have any conflict of interest or pecuniary interest to declare? Okay, nobody has anything. Are there any additions to today's agenda? Councilor Chapman?
Is 9.1 at 0:30 okay?
I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated. Councilor Simpson, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? I've been assigned the duty of being the light monitor, so I'm going to keep my mic on, but as per instructions, members of council are free to disengage the microphone until they speak, and hopefully they'll remember to engage the microphone when they want to speak to the question, okay? So another learning example of live streaming. We have council meeting minutes, item 3.1, March 26, 2018. Okay, Councilor Simpson moves that the minutes be adopted as circulated. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. And no doubt the reason that everybody's here, they want to hear about the cannabis survey. So we have Spencer Croyle and Cam Mills. Cam is with us from Orsk, and I think he has a student that's interested in the topic as well. So thank you, Cam and Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Indeed, I do have Cam with me on my right and an applied studies student with the University of Lethbridge on my left, Josh Radford. So he's going to be assisting with some of the research and background material development for the cannabis project and other projects as we head into 2018. So with regards to the item before council this afternoon, the cannabis survey, as council is well aware, we're undergoing preparations for the legalization of cannabis in July of 2018. Council's already given the go-ahead to staff to start working on a four-part public engagement strategy to determine the community's thoughts prior to enacting any legislation at the local level. The first item, of course, being the online survey. And at the February 12th meeting, council requested that the questions that go along with the survey be brought back to council for review prior to those being released to the community. So at this time, I'd like to hand off the overview of the survey and a discussion on the questions to Cam Mills.
Thanks, Spencer. Oh, there you go. So before we begin going through the specifics of the survey, again, hi, I'm Cam Mills. I haven't had the chance to meet everyone on council. I have met some of you through some of my work with the Recreation Group or through the Subdivision Development Appeal Board. I joined ORSC about a year and a half ago. It would have been a year, I guess a year in January. And I've been working with Spencer and your team on a number of issues, and this issue of the regulation of cannabis has been one that we've been looking at for some time. Wanted to take a look at a survey to put together for the town of Coaldale, and the approach with the survey was really to focus on what we would call an attitudinal survey, which is to say The purpose of the survey is to get a sense generally of where the residents of town stand on the issue, on the broader issue, and also some of the more specific elements of the issue. We want a sense of, whether the approach that's tailored to Coaldale should be more on the restrictive side or more on the lenient side, rather than sort of discussing the difference between 100 meters and 200 meters. That's a level of detail that didn't seem appropriate at this point. So we've taken a look here, and you've all got a copy of the survey. There's some minor tweaking to be done within the document that you have. Generally, the idea behind the survey is to begin by getting some general information so that when we have the information coming back, we can get a sense of if there are general demographic trends within Coaldale in terms of how how various demographics are approaching the issue. This is particularly important because there's a reasonable likelihood that not every resident of town is going to answer the survey. So we want a general sense of how to tailor it to the broader community. So that information is pretty basic. It also gives people an easy few first questions to answer to learn the tool, so they get a sense of how to work it before we start getting into more of the meat of the survey, as it will. We move into the area of looking into store locations within the town. So this will be looking to craft regulations within the land use bylaw to govern where retail cannabis locations can be placed. So we ask the first question, for example, we talk about where in town generally people would prefer to see these types of establishments open. So this would be talking about areas of town rather than questions of zoning. The second question would be to look at zoning, and we do provide a bit of a zoning map within the document as well. So the second question, very similar to the first, we want to talk about specific to the land use bylaw, the types of areas or the types of zoning that should be required in order to open this type of operation. Then we could talk a little bit about some of the regulations that are in place. So currently, for example, there is a regulation that shows up in the order of council that was put forth in February that has a 100-meter setback requirement for cannabis retail stores from schools and provincial health facilities. So what we want to understand from the residents of Coaldale, for example, is do the residents of Coaldale feel that this is substantially too restrictive a regulation, or do they feel it's not restrictive enough? The town of Coaldale will have the ability within the land use bylaw to vary that, both to make it more restrictive and also potentially to make it less restrictive. It is possible to reduce that 100-meter setback down all the way to 0, should you choose to do so. So this is, again, a question of, we're not asking, is 100 meters appropriate versus 200 meters? 100 meters is approximately one city block. We want to get a sense from residents and from respondents to say, if this is something that's important to you, do you feel that 100 meters is too much, that it's not enough? And then from there, we can take that information and craft regulations. Second question would be to say, okay, well, the only provincial standard that exists is a setback from provincial health facilities, which is, my understanding, would be provincially owned healthcare facilities like a hospital, and from schools. Some municipalities are taking the approach, and the Alberta Health Services has recommended that municipalities consider instituting setbacks from things like daycares or other cannabis retail facilities to limit the density of these stores within a community, potentially from other liquor stores. It's possible to craft regulations to limit the separation of one use from any other use within the bylaw. So the question for the town of Coaldale will be, what's the right approach here? Every municipality is going to have the opportunity to create regulations that are custom built for your community. So it's a question of what does the town of Coaldale want to see in this particular approach. Take a look at the application process. So this is, rather than taking a look at where in town these types of facilities should be located, it's a question to say, okay, what do we want from a public input perspective? What do we want from a appealability of a permit perspective? How much, how difficult or how simple should the application process for opening one of these types of locations be in the town of Coaldale? And that's what these questions are really geared towards within this section. Then there's the question of the operations of these stores. So for the most part, the operations of a store are going to be governed at the provincial level, but there will be some room within the province, within the town. For example, hours of operation, the town could choose to restrict hours of operation to less than what is mandated by the province. I don't believe you'll have the opportunity to make it more. But right now, 10 a.m. to 2 a.m., 7 days a week is what the provincial requirement is going to be. If the town of Coaldale wants to make that more restrictive, you will have the opportunity to consider that. And then there are some other questions with respect to areas of regulation that at this time, the town of Coaldale may not have the opportunity to address. However, it's possible that the town of Coaldale will be able to address those in the near future. So it makes sense while we're gathering this information to get a sense of the attitudes of residents of Coaldale with respect to things like what can be sold in a store. At this point, that's going to be very severely restricted at the outset. But if that changes and all of a sudden the town is allowed to say, decide that a retail location that sells cannabis can also sell food or something of that nature, you've already got some feedback in terms of whether you want to go that route or not, given that we're already asking the questions now. Lastly, some additional questions. So we want to understand, is there a way that folks within the town want us to communicate with respect to the regulation of cannabis or the retail sale of cannabis? We need a better understanding of where within the town consumption should be allowed. And then attitudes of folks in town just in terms of, their likelihood to attend one of these facilities and perhaps purchase the product. And then the last question is with respect to town resources, which is to say, if a lot of the feedback from folks in town is to say, yes, we want quite a bit of regulation, we want quite a bit of enforcement, to provide some understanding of whether or not that includes, using additional resources and potentially spending some more money on an operational basis on this types of thing, if that's what's important for folks.
Any members of council have any questions through to the presenters?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just wondering a little bit on the survey. I like the idea of the survey. I like most of the questions there. Just the first section on the general information on age in general, on household income and things like that. I'm wondering, is that getting a little too personal? Like, why would we need that for making decisions as council? So I'm really questioning that first section. And the second one is in section 5 when you're talking about 5C, how likely you are to purchase it. Again, I'm wondering, is that really of relevance to council to make decisions on siting and times and different regulations and stuff? Whether a person purchases it or not, it's a legal substance. We probably aren't going to run around and ask, how often are you going to buy the can of beer in the next little while to know whether we open another liquor store or not. So I just question why that question's in there. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Fair enough. So the first broader answer would be it doesn't have to be. With respect to the general information, so we didn't ask for income precisely because it seemed a little personal, but with respect to why we want to know, for example, age, the issue may be that if there's approximately 10,000 people in the town of Coaldale, if we get 300 responses to the survey, and in reviewing the information from the survey, 270 of those responses are from folks 17 and under, and everyone within the 17 and under category leans in one direction and everyone in another category leads in another direction, then we could sort of have a sense from the survey to say, well, we know what the actual demographics within the town are, so maybe the responses to the survey aren't necessarily an equal reflection of what necessarily the broader town would. We can't have everyone, if everyone in town answers the survey, then section 1 is less important. But generally speaking, we don't anticipate 10,000 responses to this type of survey. So that's why it helps us have a better understanding of what groups of people are answering questions in different ways. There's probably no way to make this perfectly statistically valid. We're just trying to make sure that while we're taking the time to ask people questions, we have as many tools in our toolkit as possible to try to extrapolate from that and get a sense of what the broader meaning of it is. And this helps us do that. But any one of those particular questions are not necessarily required. We just require, well, we don't require, but it's helpful to have some sort of data set that allows us to break down what information we're getting and from where. Does that make sense? Okay. With respect to, was it 5C? With respect to whether or not folks are intending to use. Part of this question comes back to the first question would be to say that the attitudes, so if we get attitudes with respect to wanting to restrict from the general questions, it would be interesting to know what folk, so if we have a group of people that are planning to be users of the facilities versus people that are not planning to be users of the facilities, what the breakdown of how they answer the other questions is based on that, based on being a planning to be user or not planning to be user. Let's keep in mind, we're not going to be taking people's names and address. We're not going to be able to say, oh, John at this address is planning to purchase. We're not going to have these answers. And quite frankly, there's nothing built into the survey that would restrict folks from outside of the town of Coaldale from taking it necessarily. The reason for that is to say, well, if what we're talking about is a retail store, there are going to be folks in the county that come in and use the retail stores. We don't want to restrict them from answering the questions necessarily. There just wouldn't be a lot of motivation for people from Manitoba to jump on the town of Coaldale's site and take the surveys. We just sort of trust that doesn't happen. But if that makes sense.
Councillor Chapman and Councillor Simpson, and then just be mindful that we have a delegation at 2:15 as well.
2:15.
Thank you so much, Cam, and thank you, Worship. Appreciate that this survey is for non-medicinal uses. So will we need a bylaw or zoning bylaw or bylaw for medicinal purposes as well?
The medicinal purposes, there's not a retail, so medicinal cannabis is available currently, and the way the municipal system works generally is that there are production facilities and then the product is shipped directly from the production facility to the user through an established regulatory framework. There's no retail storefront at the medical level, and there will continue not to be. So this is simply about the general purchase from the general public aged 18 and over.
Thank you.
The only question I have is for question 2, there's a few of them, and then in 5.2, there could be multiple choices, so I just want to make sure those they would be able to click on more than one choice on those. There's a few under number 2, like A and B, that they could click on more than one option.
So within the electronic format, there are some where it's, select as many as apply.
Okay.
It doesn't say that in the paper
Yeah.
copy here, but there are some where we can definitely do that.
Kevin, are you still available for later in the meeting then, in case we want to come back to this then?
Yeah.
I want to keep on track with the delegation times and that, so maybe adjourn this discussion and we can take the delegations on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we have the Lethbridge, the County of Lethbridge Community Learning Council.
For allowing us to be here today. My name is Melanie. I'm the council coordinator at the Learning Council, and this is Roxanne, my coworker. And this is our proposal to the town of Coaldale to have a representative join our board of directors. We are a learning council that seeks to enrich the quality of life and promote lifelong learning and assist individuals in developing foundational skills through our literacy programming. We are a nonprofit registered society, which is run by a dedicated group of volunteers that sit on our board. We've been established for over 30 years now, and we've provided many opportunities for learning in various forms in all parts of Lethbridge County. As I said, we are a nonprofit, and we operate on a provincial grant from the government, from the Innovation and Advanced Education Department. We provide learning opportunities in areas such as literacy, English language learning, basic computer skills, family literacy programming, workplace readiness courses, communication, and technology. We also attempt to break down barriers that adult learners face in our areas, such as childcare, transportation, and registration fees. Some of our partners currently include Alberta Health Services, Palliser Regional Schools, Chinook Books for Babies, the Early Years Coalition of Lethbridge County, FCSS, Southern Alberta Canadiers Association, and the Coaldale Public Library. As of July 2015, the mandate from our branch of government has changed. So it states that our grant money can only be used now to fund classes that fall under literacy and foundational learning programs. So these include the ones I mentioned earlier, such as adult literacy, English language learning, basic computer skills, and foundational learning, such as, again, computer skills, numeracy, GED preparation, first aid, and CPR. So our request is that we are currently seeking town representation to sit on our board of directors. We hold approximately 5 meetings a year. They're approximately 2 hours in length. At each one, we also have an annual AGM. We offer training opportunities as well as appreciation events throughout the year. And finally, I just wanted to say thank you for allowing us to make this presentation for you today, and we appreciate you taking the time to hear our request. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. Are there any questions through to the presenters? You were saying that you have the meetings, or do you know what time of the day? Are they daytime or nighttime meetings?
We usually decide that at the beginning of the year, which for us is late September, early October, and we try to come to a consensus with the current board members of what time of day is best suited for everyone to attend the most meetings. Currently, they're at 1 o'clock, but it's not set in stone.
And then would you be looking for us to fill this position if we choose right away, or in the fall time?
In the fall, yes.
Oh.
Yes, we close for the summer months. So it would be late September, early October would be our first meeting.
Any additional questions? Councillor Chapman?
Thank your worship, and thank you so much for your presentation. I was delighted to be at your meeting last year. I know that Cindy Hoffman from the town was also there, and so appreciated the invitation to the town to participate. Are you looking for a delegation from, or a representation either from council itself or from administration to be there?
Either one would be appreciated, yes.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions? Well, at this time, I'd like to thank you both for taking time to present today, and we shall entertain your requests and let you know.
Great, thank you so much.
So we have Coaldale Scouts in our midst, and I think, do you have all your delegation here, Mr. Etches and Ed? Come on, join each other. Wayne didn't want to share the limelight with you, so. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody.
We did get your your presentation through the council package as well. It's just.
Okay. I don't really know the protocol, and my
Yeah,
ears
that's fine.
are
Yeah.
not great. Sorry. You want?
No, we got everything.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. So we're here representing Scouts as part of a group that's been moving very quickly. So my name is Rex Alcock. I've been a Coaldale member now for nearly 10 years. My son goes to Beaver Scouts here. I'm in business here, and I'm representing a group that has a proposition we think everybody can win. I've struggled a little bit with what to say today because there's a lot of issues that kind of pile up with what we're looking at. So I don't want to sound like a disgruntled town member, but I've heard that complaining about something without offering any solutions is whining, so I'll just ask you to bear with me for a moment while we express some of the issues, but the solution we think is coming. Right now, the Scouts and Guides have no home to call their own. They meet in basements, random places throughout town as opportunity presents, and if they do have a place to go, it's usually at some cost, and it can be taken away with little to no notice. Some of the meeting places are arguably not really even suited for children. Coaldale has the fastest growing scouting population in the Chinook Council right now. And groups such as the Coaldale Third, where my son attends, are actually running out of room. So some of the senior citizens in town are also looking to find activities and venues within Coaldale. There is, of course, the senior center. Some of the seniors in town prefer not to go there. And those that do, they're usually getting on a van or a bus or something like that and going into Lethbridge to find activities to keep them busy just because they haven't got the room that they need here. Growing concern, and one that's also come up a lot, is the youth activity as a whole. If it isn't summer and your kids don't skate or play hockey like mine, there is quite little to do in Coaldale except look for trouble in some cases. And whether the youth aren't athletically inclined or the parents don't have the funds to put them into sports, there really isn't a lot of facilities suited for them. I am aware of one girl who recently called the town and, to quote her, had said, "There's nothing to do here." So in asking groups and organizations for their thoughts on our idea, one common sentiment had come up almost without fail. If you want to do something, you are getting up and going to Lethbridge. Simply means that people are leaving town, and if they have the energy at the end of the day, they are spending their time and their money elsewhere. And we know that the town is planning a rec center, but by all accounts that I have heard, or that we as a group have heard, this is years and millions of dollars away. So we're presenting a stopgap measure to help the town of Coaldale citizens of all ages who need something to do and somewhere to do it. And a way to keep revenue here, support local business, and open up some commercial space, among other things, add another venue for our town's activities. So we are asking the town of Coaldale to purchase the Lutheran Church on the 845. The benefits to the community are clear. Simply put, it solves or at least takes the pressure off the problem stated. There is more, but I'll suffice it to say that the businesses we have approached have been behind the idea of keeping people of Coaldale in Coaldale. To that end, they've actually offered sponsorship of some events there. Scouts and Guides would have a home, thereby opening up spaces for rent for more permanent uses such as offices and storage. Youth and senior centers would have their needs met in town, and this space could be used as a movie theater to show movies sponsored by local businesses, and as a side note, that has been supported by quite a lot of the businesses that we've talked to. I could go on, but I'm sure that not only the need, but the potential for solution is clear. And if you want more information on that, we can go through in more detail what we've come up with. So the remaining time I've just used to go through what is important to you. It's how this is going to work, what will the town's commitment be, and how much will it cost. So how it will work is we have already put together a group of volunteers who would take charge of running the building. This would not be limited to maintenance and upkeep, but also looking after the booking, the financial requirements, and the day-to-day as well as month-to-month operations. Booking events would be handled through this group and would have no negative effect on the town's events coordinator. We would also ask a member of council be a part of this group on the town's behalf to advise on any issues that would arise. This person would essentially be a liaison and hold no more power or responsibility than anyone else on the group. What would the town's commitment be? Quite frankly, as little as possible. We are looking to solve a lot of issues that we see in the community and fill a need that we have good reason to believe has already gotten enough interest and support that we can make this building self-sustaining. The town's commitment would simply be to own the building until a suitable replacement is found or required. Alternative venue would be put in its place, we're hoping, when the rec center arrives. But ultimately, the ownership of the building would be the town's to decide. The big one is how much it would cost, and simply put, we don't know. This is because the Lutheran Church has not given us a number. The reasons for that are known to me. It is not my place to say, so I will leave it at the town's assessment, being that it is just the property is just under $370,000 in evaluation. I spoke to somebody here in town about that to get that number just a little over 2 weeks ago. In my discussion with Simon, who is showing the building on behalf of the church, the organization has expressed support for the ideas that we've shared with him, and on a personal level, he seems to be behind us as well as feels that the church would be as well. So some of what I have here now is a bit speculative. The facts for these are in your walls, but I don't really have access to them. So as I say, a little speculation here. Since the building has operated as a church, the town would lose no revenue by not receiving taxes. So in that sense, the books would remain balanced. Also, prime real estate is in a shortage on Main Street, and the value is only going up as our population and demand continue to increase. I will be one of the realtors in the Remax storefront that's coming up here soon. So I know how long Dallas Hardy has been looking for property here and only just found it. From that point of view, buying and holding the property with us in it, it will only rise in value, and it could be viewed as an investment. Keeping the people in town instead of Lethbridge not only bolsters local business, but as a result, we'll see more revenue within the town. With grants and donations, possibly some involvement from CFEP, the Wellness Center, and a workforce of qualified volunteers, particularly within the Scouts group, we would need nothing from you beyond the purchase of the building itself. A number of tradespeople and service providers have already offered their services to see this go forward. Some of those include a professional building inspector, a plumber, an electrician, as well as many other trades. From a political standpoint, the town will have done something to provide a venue until the rec center is built to provide for the needs of the community. The people involved in the project will know it. Every person involved with this will know it, and soon everybody in town will. We have moved quickly on this because we don't want to lose the opportunity that we have with it being in sale. We're simply asking you to help us help our community by purchasing this. Thanks for listening.
Yes, if I could. You know, I've been in town since '81, and throughout that period, everybody is, or anybody that's approached me, even when I was on the police commission for 19 years, approached me with respect to keeping the kids off the streets. And one of the problems was they've got nothing better to do. My dad raised 9 of his own and 2 others, and he always maintained if he could keep the kids busy, they'll stay out of trouble. Mom always said that there was no such as a bad kid, just a kid with too much time on his hands. I've always maintained that it's the responsibility to raise a child. It takes the whole community to raise a child, and this is an opportunity to provide facilities for that. Notwithstanding that, when I talk to the seniors, you know, the seniors, they pay their taxes like everybody else in this room, but don't feel that they get their full value for their dollar. You know, they pay education tax, they pay the normal tax. They don't have kids in school, and some of them don't even have vehicles, so they don't even get the benefit of driving on the streets. But what they would like to have is something in Coaldale where they don't have to travel. A lot of them, even if they have cars, don't like to drive to Lethbridge because they, you know, they don't feel comfortable on the highway. But they would drive from their house to a venue that's in town for movies, you know, events that they hold at the seniors' place now, like Rocks and Rings. You know, seniors, even though we've got a curling rink, they're not safe on ice. Seniors, when they step on ice, they don't feel that it's that safe. So Rocks and Rings is perfect because it's on floors that they can stand on. When they hold that in the senior center, what happens is they can hold the event, but there's no room to stand around and watch or sit. A lot of them they don't like to play it necessarily, but they enjoy watching other people play it, but they can't do that. Just no room. Movies, you know, we've looked at the possibility of bringing in movies for these seniors. They run their own movies now. I think what they do now is they run to the library and get a video and sit and watch a TV set. So it's not very conducive to comfortable, you know, viewing because you got everybody trying to sit around looking at a TV set. And I know as I get older, I don't see that well. So I imagine the real old ones, they're having the same problem. You know, visibility gets kind of restricted. And when I talked to the seniors, when I was running around town trying to get support from the businesses, I talked to a few seniors, and they're looking at moving out of Coaldale because they don't feel that Coaldale actually provides enough. Lethbridge does. Lethbridge has their movies, and they have access to the movies like taxis, etc. It's pretty hard to get a taxi at a reasonable price from Coaldale to Lethbridge. And we don't want that. We don't want to see them spending their money in Lethbridge. If your kid wants to get married in this area, we've got the Ready Made Center. But unless you want to plan 3 years in advance to set a venue, we've got marriages in this province that don't even last 3 years. So, it's a situation where, like one of my cubs, he's getting married, not this year, but next year. And a year and a half ago, he booked this venue. We could use this facility. It's got a kitchen, it's got a dining area, it's got a very comfortable area for weddings. You could book that at $1,400 a weekend. And that's how we feel that we can cover the cost of operating this facility. Since '81, I've always been looking for this type of facility. When we were a smaller community, we used to have a movie theater. We used to have a bowling alley. As we grow larger and larger, we seem to lose all this stuff. Those things were important those days. We look at your rec center that you're proposing. You obviously see a need for this type of facility, and we've got a solution. We can provide you that for the 5-year period, and if after 5 years the facility that you've come up with replaces what we're providing, then move us out, sell the building, and get your money back plus. So we don't think this is a situation where the town will lose, but it takes some pressure off council to get that facility up and running for the next 5 years, or longer. I don't know how long it's going to take to get that facility together. So like I say, since '81, since I've been here, I haven't seen a suitable venue for this type of community built service. Like, we want this to be an activity center for youth, adults, and youth groups in town, like Cubs and Scouts and things like that. And this is the first opportunity. I saw the Buddhist church when that was a movie house at one time. And but that's only a single purpose building, so that wasn't suitable. When I looked at that way back when they first converted to a church, it's got a sloped floor. We need a flat floor. We have enough kids with these kids running into walls and posts in the basement. The sound of their head hitting the steel beams that hold up the building, kind of neat, but kids don't like it. So like I say, I think we need to get out of that facility. The floor space in the church is 65 by 35, which is perfect for us. We can do our floor hockey, which we can't do now. We can play our Hungry Hippos, which we made up some carts and we play that sort of game. We've got indoor foosball that we can't set up now because our space is too small. It's hard. Scouting is finding that it's losing members, youth, because we can't keep them excited. We get these kids come to us and they're all wound up, but we have to tell them to sit and be quiet because there's tenants in the building that we upset with the noise that we're making. If we had a facility that stands alone like this, we wouldn't have that issue. I think that's about, I've run out of things to say.
Thank you, Rex and Wayne, for your passionate presentation on the topic. Is there any questions? Councillor Avery?
Thank you, Your Worship. Not speaking in favor or against the proposal. Some of the things that do concern me is if we purchase it and then we start renovating, we're changing occupancy of an existing facility. So our $375,000 could turn into $700,000 really quick if we have asbestos inside the facility that we have to start removing. So it would be nice if you could work with our administration a little bit closer in the next couple of weeks to.
I can answer a little bit to that. Brian Henschel of Great Plains Home Inspection has offered for free to do an inspection for us of the building. To answer questions of that nature, the only reason that he hasn't moved forward is that we kind of wanted to gauge the response and find out if it was worth having him come out. But he didn't even let me finish once I was starting to tell him the idea of why we're behind this, and he is going to be quite willing to do that for us. And of course, we would make that report that he does up available to the town.
Thank you.
Can I comment on that as well?
Yep.
Right now, there are offices in the basement. We don't see, like upstairs, the only renovation we would see is removing the pews. We don't see any walls going in or any walls coming out to do what we need to do. What I'd like to do is improve access to the property. There's a lift that people can go up and down on this electric lift, but I think a wheelchair ramp would be the only thing. And we think we can find funding to do that outside of
Right.
the town.
And, you know, the kitchen, you're talking about renting the facility out, you'll have to have a commercial kitchen in there with the suppression system. Again, it'd be nice to know what the costs are gonna be if we're gonna make a commitment, because we wanna make sure the facility is up to code and safe for the scouts and the people that are renting the facility.
Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and thank you so much for your presentation. And I don't have I'm not either against or for it. However, I do have some questions. Rex, you had mentioned that you have some free or trades that would be willing to help out. Would you have letters of support for that purpose that you'd be looking for?
We have provided some letters of support as far as businesses and whatnot. When it comes to trades, a lot of that is internal within the Scouts. You know, we have a wide variety of tradespeople within the Scouts as an organization, and that's only as far as we've gone to this point, because we are, we're coming as Scouts representatives, so we've really stayed within that so far. But at this time, we've had no problem finding people who would volunteer their skills. Really, what we're going to have to find will be donations of building materials, whatever may be required. And some of that, of course, will, I'm sure, come up after our inspection and whatnot. But if you would like a list of tradespeople that would be able to, and just other services that would be able to provide, we can definitely do that.
Thank you. Just a final question. I noticed on here letters of support from majority of them would be members of the Chamber of Commerce. You talk about the seniors quite a bit, both in your presentation and in your letter to council. Have you received any written or verbal support from the seniors that would accentuate this proposal forward?
Well, I've talked to Colleen Belter, who handles the social coordinator of the seniors, or part of it. And that was her biggest concern, you know, that they, right now, if they want to run, do a movie or something, they get the buses from the Green Acres Foundation, come out, pick them up, take them to Lethbridge. And she says, as far as the Rocks and Rings, they just can't run that program successfully and have everybody enjoy it. So she was very much in favor of having this facility here, easier access for them, and the room. It's plenty of room. Like I say, there's, in the whole year, since '81, since I've been here, I've never seen a venue that has opened up like that. We used to have the gym in John Davidson, but they kicked us out of there. The schools won't let us use their gyms. So we're sort of hooped. You know, we need space. And this is perfect for what we see as a community building for seniors and, like I say, Cubs, or Guides and Scouts.
Just a little bit to add on that, some of the reason that we haven't already got a little more formal paperwork as far as showing support from organizations like this is simply the time that we've taken. As I mentioned, being in real estate, I've personally fielded 2 other phone calls about people that are interested in finding out information about the building. So we've been moving just as fast as we can to even bring you what we have today. But you know, we're not intending to stop where we're at. We can get more letters of support, and we can provide that, because we've had over the phone, anybody that we've talked to has been quite behind us on this. We just haven't been able to necessarily get everything together where we can place it in front of you and say, here you go.
Thank you.
It's hard to make a commitment to anybody until we've got a venue, right? So if we knew we had council support, then it's easy to go and get, you know, this type of support letters and things like that.
So Wayne, just on that, you would be acting as, you would be the landlords per se of the facility, and then cost recovery purpose, so there would be a rental fee formula for every group, including seniors?
Well, we don't want it to make a whole bunch of money. We'd like it to cover the costs and things like that, but what we're trying to do is get a venue that is, economical for our groups. We pay $150 a month, not huge, but it's more than, we have to raise all our money through like the light campaign, picking up trees. You guys are gracious enough to let us pick up trees, and you pay us for that. Because we don't keep any of the money from registrations. All that we get from registrations goes right to Ottawa. So every dollar that we collect in Cubs, we don't get a nickel of it. So every nickel that we generate through all of these various fundraising, that's all we have to operate on. So we don't see like this is a huge money-making thing. It's not going to be like Ready-Made, where it's booked every weekend for a wedding, etc. We want to keep it open for seniors. We want to keep it open for Cubs, guides, things like that as much as we can. But we will be running events to generate funds just to fund the operation of the building.
Thank you very much for your proposal. I know it's hard to do anything right now, but going forward, I think council would need to see sort of a business plan on, income and, the way that you might be able to cover off the utilities and whatnot. And then also, I'd be interested to know what kind of governance you might have on the building itself, on if there would be preferred status, for like, is it gonna be preferred that the scouts get first dibs on it, then some kind of hierarchy of who would be using it, kind of thing, because that could be problematic if you get a lot of support and then other groups say, oh gee, like it's turning out to be just this one kind of group's building kind of thing. So, but it's hard for you to put all that effort in until you know where we're going to go with, and I appreciate that. But I think it's a good first blush on the needs assessment and solutions. So we appreciate that very much, and we'll give it more thought. Doreen?
I just have one question, Your Worship. Do you know how long ago it was when we had the Scouts Hall in Coaldale? And I think that worked out really well, didn't it, when they had their own hall?
Yeah, we had that way back when, before the community center was built. And it was a facility that we had. And basically, the town, or the group decided they needed a community center there, kicked us out of that. They provided us with other facilities over time, but eventually we were out on our own. We've been out for quite a while. So whenever that community center was built was the last actual place we had of our own. Thank you.
Okay. Any last questions before? Well, thank you again, gentlemen.
Well,
and
thank you for your time. Yeah, we appreciate it.
Delegation isn't available right now, so we'll move right into the finishing up item 4.1. So, Cam, I think you can handle the heavy lifting while Spencer's following up on the delegation here. So, is there any residual questions of Cam on the survey?
I do, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. Cam, just moving forward with the bylaws, with the survey, a couple of questions. One is, has the survey been vetted out like through other surveys that are provincial wide?
Well, in putting it together, we took a look at a similar survey that the city of Edmonton did. Obviously, within my position at the Old Man River Service Commission, we serve about 40 or so municipalities within this district. The town of Coaldale is, to the best of my knowledge, the only one that's taking this active public engagement path with respect to this issue. We've got a pretty wide variation of municipalities in terms of how they're approaching this issue, and they're all reasonable approaches, but none of our other municipalities are currently engaged in this type of activity.
I guess where I'm going with that is obviously possibly a year from now, we will probably be looking at amendments of some sort and trying to kind of get a better picture of where we're at. The city of Calgary, for example, has already established a public bylaw whereby there'll be no public consumption of cannabis at either in public places or out in the outdoors area. And I'm just curious as to if there will possibly be a standard by which most of Albertans will comply or have to comply by, say, even by this time next year.
Yes and no. There will be provincial standards with respect to things like public consumption, and also with some of these issues that we talked about with respect to the more of the sort of land use planning considerations. Generally speaking, the municipality will have the opportunity to choose how to vary those restrictions within the municipal context. Some municipalities will choose to do so, others will choose not to. It's probably reasonable to assume that there will be some bylaw amendments that the town will at least consider with respect to public consumption and how to regulate that. That would be that wouldn't necessarily be a land use bylaw amendment. That might be something similar to how you approach tobacco regulation within town. But that would be something that the town would need to address over the course of the next few months.
Just one further question. Thank you, Worship. The business community will have will have opportunity to have input into this. Just for an example, a business owner is contemplating prohibiting any consumption on their property. So that's just an idea whereby would they have the ability to have a personal regulation on that behalf? Whether that might be included in your survey or not.
It's not with respect to the survey itself as it stands. I mean, individual business owners with respect to things like staff consumption of cannabis will have the same ability to regulate that as they do currently for alcohol consumption on their premises. So there will be a number of facets of cannabis regulation that'll take place. The federal government has some regulations. The province has some regulations. The occupational health and safety will address it to a certain extent. What we're trying to really focus on here is, specifically what the municipal regulations will look like. Perhaps most specifically with respect to how adjustments to the land use bylaw will be made to accommodate that.
I'm good with all the work that you put into the survey myself. The one question you ask us to answer is the date for release. What are the parameters around that? You didn't propose a certain date in your report, so.
No, thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor. Basically, the intent was if council sees the survey as being ready to go live as of this meeting, we would respectfully request that direction, and then we could make it live as early as tomorrow, if you like.
With respect to the appropriateness of some of the questions, we might answer direction there as well.
Any more questions with respect to the specific questions, wording? Do you have one final thing, Spencer, then?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was a question at the beginning of the discussion about some of the qualifying questions regarding age, gender, household status, level of educational attainment. We just wanted clarity as staff as to whether there's further discussion in that regard. any desired changes to the wording, or do we just carry forward as is?
Address those questions, and I don't think there was any follow-up to indicate any changes. But seems rational on why you want them to validate. Go ahead, Councillor Pauls.
Thank you, Mayor. On application process, B, is there supposed to be a not between otherwise and allowed? Isn't it?
Sorry, 3B?
Yeah, page 8.
No. So what we're saying is that when we refer to something being allowed in the land use bylaw, we're talking. What we're talking about here is to say, okay, the retail cannabis store location is saying allowed in a commercial district. What we're trying to understand is, should it be allowed in a commercial district in the sense that it should be a permitted use or a discretionary use, which is to say,
Oh, okay.
if
Okay.
it meets the requirements, it's automatically approved, your staff takes care of it, it's automatic, or should it go to MPC, be more public discussion, be appealable, that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Councillor Chapman, do you have a follow-up question, or?
I don't, Your Worship. I would be willing to make a motion to recommend that council approve the survey as drafted and formatted, and a date for the release of the survey be set. So recommendation number 1.
You say immediate release of the survey then? Is that right?
If that's works with the researchers in front of us.
So a couple minor textual changes to what was shown on the screen versus what's in the document, so will that allow us to do that still?
Yeah. If I may, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification's sake, Cam just wanted to clarify that we have room to make minor adjustments that wouldn't affect the wording necessarily, just to update it so that it reads as clearly as possible when it does go out to release.
Then you're,
All right, so then you're fine with that motion, with the understanding that they would make some editorial changes that don't modify the intent of the question, right?
Yes.
that is correct. Yes.
And then the survey can be released at your convenience, and when you have it all ready to go, then. Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. This is follow-up to the March 26th council meeting where we were updating the council procedural bylaw 739-GE-03-18 to be reflective of the new council daytime meetings as well as leading to the live streaming. There was 9 requested amendments by council at that meeting, and so I'm returning today with those amendments and to see if there's any further question or inquiries.
Okay, thank you, Anna, for your updating of it. Does the revised bylaw meet everybody's approval, or are there any questions?
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Lana, for your work on this. 5.1, number 2, council shall not meet during the month of August. You've made clarity to the option for council to have meetings if necessary, so that's really good. The one thing I wanted to appraise you with is the fact that if and when a councillor is not able to be at a council meeting and can do it via teleconference, it is common practice amongst other boards that I've been on that any in-camera communication that takes place that the person that is doing the teleconference would not be able to participate in that in-camera session. So I support that position very well.
Councillor Simpson?
Just after the last meeting, I did find that 2 o'clock time actually doesn't work for me, and I know we agreed upon it. I just wanted to make sure that it stated that the 2 o'clock is a little bit harder on our family after having some time to be able to follow through on that.
Okay. So then we have Councillor Holm, do you have a comment then? Oh,
Just going to move that we have first reading of this bylaw.
okay. We have a motion by Councillor Holm to move for first reading of the bylaw. Then Councillor Chapman, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Just before we make the motion.
Well, the motion's made.
The
so
motion's
you can
made,
speak to it.
just the wording thing on 6.1C, and it talks about consent of 50% plus 1, so it's basically you would need to just change the wording to majority.
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
So you accept that as a friendly amendment, Councillor Holm, then?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion to first reading? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. The floor is open for a second reading if anybody wants to.
I would like to move second reading of this bylaw.
Okay, Councillor Holm proposes second reading. All in favor? Does anybody want to support a motion for unanimous consent to hold all three readings in one meeting? Councillor Chapman?
I can make that motion.
Okay, Councillor Chapman moves for the unanimous consent motion. All in favor? Okay, and that's carried unanimously. Does anybody care to sponsor third and final reading of the bylaw? Councillor Avery, any discussion? All in favor? Okay, thank you. Okay, item 5.3, unfortunately the delegation is unable to attend, so we'll show that is deleted from the agenda then. Okay, and 7.1, we have Michelle.
This report is just to update council on the pension for the RCMP, which is actually only a small portion of what we pay for our RCMP, but just to give council an update as to what's happening with the RCMP salaries and negotiations that are ongoing right now.
Any questions through to Michelle? Motion to receive the information, the report for information, please. Councillor Pauls, all in favor? Thank you. Then we have Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce. They're requesting a letter of support. Councillor Chapman. Any discussion? Councillor Holm?
I read this letter from them probably 4 or 5 times, and I really have no idea what it is they're asking for. So I have trouble supporting writing a letter of support when I really have no idea what it is that they're asking for. Unless somebody else can kind of help me with this, I can't support this motion.
Refers specifically to the intermodal system, and there used to be intermodal facilities in the area, and then the railway station kind of reallocated them to bigger urban centers. So my reading is that they're hopeful that we would support intermodal locally again. We have a motion by Councillor Chapman to issue the requested letter of support for their intermodal request. Is there any other discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? That's 3. And opposed? Are you in or out? You were in? Oh, 4. Okay. So you get the recorded vote then?
Was Councillor Simpson for or against the board?
4. Okay, that vote is defeated. And Settler Days, Cindy Hoffman, please.
4 to 3.
I think it was approved 4 to 3.
Was it? I thought I got 4 against. Okay, who voted in favor? Oh, okay. All right. I guess my math is wrong. New math. 4 in favor. Okay, Cindy.
Perfect, thank you. The town is going to be planning Settler Days this year and into the future. So this was just to let council know that, you did already, but we'd also like to request, if you're willing to, for up to 3 members of council to sit on the working group with us. So.
Okay, so we have the report, and the request. So I guess any volunteers? When will you have your first meeting?
Actually, we've got the first one scheduled for this Wednesday, April 9th.
Right.
I know it's coming up very quickly, but July is coming up very fast as well, so.
Okay, so we have, I believe, Councillor Chapman
7.
step forward. Is there anybody else?
Pardon me? Or April 11th, sorry. Right now, we've just got it, the first meeting's going to be at 7 p.m. at the museum, just to get things started, and then from there, we'll just poll everybody to see what time works best for them, so.
I can attend the first one, but they moved to evening, or
Okay.
outside of evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Avery. Anybody else has a interest at this point in time? I'll put my name on the roster, but whether or not I can make all the meetings or not.
No, that greatly appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Councillor Avery has a question.
Thank you, Worship. This is more for administration. So we decided now that we're setting up Settlers Days, that we're not doing July 1st. Is that correct? It was, that's, okay.
Kevin, you want to add to that?
That's correct, given that it falls on a Sunday this year. There won't be Canada Day festivities on July 1st on the Sunday, and there's a lot of other regional events taking place on the Saturday and the Monday. So our understanding of the consensus, the discussion is that there wouldn't be a Canada Day festivities this year, given that the festivities for Settlers Days would take place the week after.
Okay, because my understanding was not only this year, but the future of, so we didn't tax the staff, that we were going to eliminate the July 1st and focus the staff's time and funding into the Settlers Days, because we're interfering with other events that were happening in the city and other towns around us on the same day. I'm looking for clarity. That's the direction we were going.
I believe you have a grasp on the go forward.
Okay, thank you.
Right, Cindy?
Sorry, I missed that.
Councillor Avery was looking for clarity that we're not going to really entertain the organization of Canada Day as a town function, right?
That was my understanding. I wasn't 100% sure if that was the wishes of council or not, but
Okay.
that's
That's our understanding, is that we're gonna focus our attention on settler days going forward as a town entity, and if any other community group wants to run with Canada Day, then they can fill their patriotic boots and run with it. Okay, good. And then we have item 8, the development stats. Cindy's proud as punch to jump up and report on the big numbers here.
Yeah, so the first quarter of 2018 has been slow due to the weather. So as you can see, in our first quarter, we're back around the 2016 mark for the number of new dwelling units. But construction value wise, we are ahead of the last 4 years.
Any questions through this, Cindy, on 8.1 or 8.2? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Cindy, just a question I'd asked a while ago about the seasons and what percentage of their development would be full.
I know I figured out that number. I think it's sitting on my desk, so I can email it to you or email it out to council.
Thank you very much for your reports. They're very informative, and as soon as winter gets over, then you'll be filling in more cells in the spreadsheet, I hope. A motion to receive 8.1 and 8.2 for information. Councillor Simpson, any discussion? All in favor? Okay, 8.1 and 8.2 are received for information. And then item 9.1, I sent out the report. I apologize for the lateness of it, but I thought with my cold and that, I wanted to try and have something in written form so that you could have a look at it in case my cold got the better of me. So it's there, and I'll entertain any questions if you have any.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I appreciate all your hard work and effort on the SAWA project. I would move that SAWA provide the following reports, 1 through 4 as presented.
Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. And then if you're interested in joining on the meeting, please let me know so we can have numbers, and that would be good. That's the reason that we do have those meetings, move around the geographical footprint so that interested parties from councils can join in and get a right from the horse's mouth update on everything. Okay, thank you. Then we have information items 11 to 11.5. Excuse me. Anybody, Councillor Holm?
I would move 11.1 to 11.5 for information.
Thank you very much. Any discussion on any of those information items? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, then we have to go back in the agenda. Your wishes on 5.1. I maybe consider tabling that till fall when we're getting more closer to the time of doing our organizational meeting. I think we're interested in that, but we can table that discussion, I think, till a little bit later in the year. Does anybody care to, if anybody agrees with that thought, you can make a motion to table. Councillor Lloyd, all in favor? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Then 5.2. Anything now, or do you want to kind of marinate on this a bit and that we don't, it's not necessary to have a delegation and necessarily make a hard and fast decision the same day, so we could table it for, until the next meeting to give time for reflection in that. Councillor Simpson?
The one thing maybe I would ask is maybe if administration would be able to get a price on the building, just kind of what we kind of, when we're talking about it, just so we kind of know for sure what we're looking at, if that would work.
Okay, so your motion would be to direct the administration to explore the pricing of the building?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, we have that motion by Councillor Simpson and Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. Can I make a friendly amendment to that by adding that administration also work with the scout group on the, they said they had a building inspector and somebody that would do a building inspection on it as well, so we could start getting some of those after costs.
Would you consider that friendly?
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, how friendly do you want to get, maybe?
I'd like to add some more friendliness to that motion, that I would also like to see an operation budget included, that administration work with the Scouts group for an operations budget, just so that we really understand how much it does cost to heat and et cetera at that building, and see where the Scouts are thinking of how much money they're going to be bringing in and out. Just, I don't want to get an albatross hooked on our taxpayers, just to make sure that we've got it right.
So I understand that perhaps what you want to do is get maybe a estimate on the fixed cost that the building would have, and then we could communicate that back to the group so that they knew that that would be the minimum number that they have to cover off. Is that right, or just clarity to that?
I want fixed costs, but I also want an operating budget.
Yeah, like the heating and. Okay.
Yeah.
How friendly is that? Friendly? Okay. So Lana, what you understand the motion to be?
Yeah, that's a lot of words.
Well, that's
We did pass the bylaw, and if it's 25 words or more, I think Councillor Simpson has to write it out according to the bylaw.
Maybe, yeah. I'll write out my portion, you guys write out yours.
Hey, Lana, maybe can you read back maybe what you might?
Well, I've just made some notes here, but my first draft would be that Councillor Simpson requested that administration explore pricing on the cost of the Redeemer Lutheran Church, to include pricing and an operational budget, and to work with the Scout group on that matter.
To work with the Scout group with regards to a building inspection.
Operational budget and building inspection?
Right. Yep. So we'll grant Councillor Simpson the waiver of the bylaw and. Okay. Any discussion? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you. Just speaking in favor of the motion and speaking to the motion, would the wording for Councillor Holm be that he used operational budget be considered as a business plan, or would that be all inclusive?
No, I don't.
Okay.
The intent was for a robust business plan, just more of an idea on the total cost of what it would take to keep the building operating, maintained, and that going forward. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. Right. Yeah. I think we covered off all the public part. Motion to go in camera. Councillor Lloyd, all in favor?